He is the former Congressman of North Carolina, currently running for local congressman in District 19, and he was also homeschooled, so he can relate to you. We want to give him our full attention. Thank you so much for coming and blessing us today.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you again. Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you guys. So, my mom was actually in town. She lives in North Carolina, but it's super cold up there. And so, anyway, she decided to stay for a little while. But she actually made the brave decision to homeschool me right when I was born. And I'll tell you, it was the greatest blessing I've ever had. You know, especially when I was growing up. I was born in 1995. Homeschooling was not nearly as popular as it is today. And so, you know, my mom took some flack. I'm sure your parents have heard some weird stuff. People being like, oh, do you want to homeschool and this, and that, and the other. But then now, here in 2026, we start looking at the statistics. And homeschoolers are dominating every single field. You know, and so many people who go to different forms of education, you know, they are just forced to learn memorization over and over and learn how to study things within all these very strict and set guidelines. But the great thing about being homeschooled is we learn the actual skill of learning. We learn how to actually go out and understand something. It's like, oh, this is something that interests me. I want to understand every piece of it. You're not having to be within exact guardrails, people telling you that things have to get done right here and on this exact time. And so I think being homeschooled is such an advantage. And really, a lot of people said it would dampen your ability to succeed. But, you know, I will tell you, when I was 24 years old, I was elected as the youngest member of Congress in U.S. history. And it was one of the greatest things that, you know, we were able to accomplish in Western North Carolina. And, you know, per the Constitution, you have to be 25 years old to be sworn in as a member. So I was lucky to be able to get elected and then turn 25 and get sworn in really, really fast after that. But anyways, I want to tell you guys, my name is Madison Cawthorn. It is great to get to be here seeing all your guys' faces. But I want to tell you a little bit about my story. So when I was 18 years old, and if you can't see me in the back, it's because I'm in a wheelchair here. But I'll tell you, when I was 18 years old, you know, I was a great athlete. I was homeschooled, playing football. Everything was going great. But then I was in a horrific car accident. You know, my buddy fell asleep while he was driving. I was in the passenger seat, and we ran headlong into a concrete wall. And I woke up in a hospital, you know, after finding out what had happened. The car had surged forward. It had ripped the side panels open, exposed the fuel line. Then the spark had ignited the fuel, and the car caught on fire. So I was burned alive for several minutes. Then after I was taken out of the car, got into a hospital, you know, my mom got a call that no parent ever wants to get. But from there, you know, I then after a while, I found out what all kind of happened to me. You know, my spine had a burst fracture at the T12 vertebrae, which is why I can't use my legs. One of my kidneys was ripped off. My diaphragm ruptured. Both of my lungs collapsed. I had severe internal bleeding. I had a traumatic brain injury. And by all accounts, I should not be alive. You know, there are a lot of people, insurance companies saying, well, we're not going to have to pay that because he's got a 98% chance of dying in the next couple days. But as you all know, you know, there's also not just doctors that came to my aid, but also, you know, people started to pray. And that was the biggest thing, is God stepped in and was able to make a difference in my life and give me a second chance to be alive. But I'll tell you, when you go through that kind of an accident, and all of a sudden you realize that your legs have been taken from you, and I wasn't even able to speak at the time because my diaphragm was ruptured, and I had tubes all in me. Coming out of that, you know, I really had to grapple with who I was. But the really greatest benefit of that entire thing is that as I was sitting there, you know, my identity wasn't found in the fact that I could run really fast, or the fact that I was 6'4", or the fact that, you know, I had blonde hair. My identity was found in the fact that I was a Christian and that I was sent here by God. And, you know, there's a great line from Esther when she's talking to her uncle. You know, he says, perhaps you were born for such a time as this. Perhaps you were put here for such a time as this. And so as I started thinking about what my life was going to look like, you know, I realized maybe God put me in this wheelchair for a reason. Maybe he has me here, you know, on an advanced course to be able to get prepared for whatever he has for me. And as we've seen the direction that our country's going, so many evil things want to happen. People from outside our nation want to destroy us. People from inside our nation want to destroy us, our history, our heritage, all the things that we love and our freedoms. You know, I realized God had to set me apart. He had to set me on a path to be able to stand up and to be able to fight for what is true and for what is good. And so as I started going through that, you know, I had a really difficult time. But, you know, because I was homeschooled, I feel like I was given such an advantage. Whereas so many people would have just said, oh, well, you know, my life is over. I'm not going to be able to overcome this. I'm not going to be able to take advantage of, you know, any of the opportunities that I have left in life. But you know what? Because I was homeschooled, I knew how to learn. I knew how to read. I knew how to do all these things. And so I started devouring a bunch of books. Obviously spent a lot of time with the Lord. You know, I started a business when I was 21 years old. That went really well. It was in real estate. And then when I turned 24, the congressman that had been serving as my congressman left to be the chief of staff for Donald Trump. And it just turns out that I happened to do speech and debate when I was growing up. I think I started when I was 14 years old. And my mom had the great choice. She decided to drive me up to this very, you know, meek and mild-mannered guy who decided to be my debate coach. And, you know, he taught me how to debate all the way through. I was really close friends with his son. And then he, out of nowhere, decided to run for Congress. And he became a congressman, and that was after I got out of the hospital. You know, he decided to give me a job in his office. And so all of these things just started lining up. But then Donald Trump called him. He asked if he wanted to be his chief of staff. And so Mark Meadows left to go be his chief of staff. And then I got to run for that position, and we were able to run. And now I'll tell you, I'm sure you guys, can anybody here tell me the 3 branches of the federal government? You.
The legislative.
Yes.
The judicial.
Yes.
And the presidential. Was that
the executive? Yeah, but that's exactly it. Mom, can you give me one of these books? What's your name, brother?
Kai.
Kai, that's a good name. So, as a member of Congress, I was in the legislative, meaning that I get to write the laws. And for all 50 states, all across America, all of our territories, any of the rules that are applied equally across all 50 states, we got to write those. Also, the legislative branch is in charge of the purse strings. So we control how many taxes you paid and then how those taxes are spent, which is probably one of the most important jobs, because people can get anything they want to get done. The president can want anything he wants to get done. The judges can say this is legal, that's not legal. But if there's no funding for the enforcement of that, then it really is kind of a moot point. And so as a member of Congress, I got to really understand where our tax dollars are being spent. And if you really think about it, you know, our forefathers, you know, the founding generation in 1776, they went to war with the greatest empire the world had ever known for a 3% rise in taxes. And when I start seeing how people are taxed today, you know, it's ridiculous, the overburden that they put on so many American workers and families to then just send our money overseas, which is really sad. So when I got involved in office, I realized, oh my gosh, we have to try and get our spending under control, because otherwise we're going to be indebted to foreign nations, to powers that don't love us. And so that's the things that I got to get involved with. But one of the coolest things about being a member of Congress is that you can really make a difference in just individual citizens' lives. You know, one of the first things I ever found out, there was a guy who had a pizza truck business. He had 4 or 5 of these pizza trucks. I had just been elected as a member of Congress. And so he told me that, you know, the IRS was not sending him his tax rebate, which was in the millions of dollars. So he's going to have to shut down his food truck business and lay off about 50 people that lived in my district. But one of the coolest parts about being a member of Congress is then when I was next in D.C., I went to the IRS building, I rolled in, and I said, hey, this citizen, here's a social security number. For whatever reason, he's not getting anything. We were able to cut through all of the red tape and just sign an order for him to get paid right away. And so that's one of the reasons why our founding fathers went to war, to be able to have a representative government. It's to say that if you have to spend taxes, if you have to obey your laws, then the government should be for the people and by the people. So it would essentially be like if this entire room, there's about 50 of us in this room. If we were to decide to elect one of these people to go make decisions for us, you would want it to be someone that represents how the majority of you feel almost all the time. And so that's what makes our country so special, because every 2 years we have an opportunity to vote on 535 members of Congress. You have 100 senators, and then you have 435 people in the House of Representatives. And what that makes our country so unique is that we have an opportunity every 2 years to have a bloodless revolution. If you wanted everybody's favorite color to have to be blue, or everybody to say, hey, we're not going to be fighting in foreign wars over in this area, all you have to do is get involved in elections to the point that you get 535 people elected to office. And even if the president says no, then you would have a supermajority and you can overpower and veto and go against his veto. And so being involved in politics is extraordinarily important. That's just something that I wanted to instill in all of you, because when you start thinking about it, when children are sent to government schools, people are often curious, why does it seem like they're so brainwashed? Why does it seem like they don't believe in the things that, that our older generations were taught? And it's because they're sent to federal institutions to get them to love the federal government. Whereas homeschoolers, we're encouraged to be free thinkers. We're encouraged to go out and test boundaries, to understand, hey, where can I be of the most value? And these are the areas that I think that, we are going to be set apart as this generation who is sent here for such a time as this. So I want you guys to take a lot of heart in the fact that regardless of whatever circumstances or obstacles are thrown at you, you might be in a terrific car accident. You might have something terrible happen to you or to your family. But remember, if your foundation is based on God, if your foundation is based on things that are immutable and cannot be changed, you will be able to charge forward through any of those difficult situations to be able to make a difference for your country. And you know what? I was born in August, so if any of you are born in an odd year, whether it's 2003, 2005, anything like that, and before the month of August, you could beat me to be the youngest member of Congress ever elected. And so, guys, I just want to encourage you for that. But I wanted to open up the floor. I know a lot of people that Congress is a long ways away. What happens in our federal government is a long ways away. Does anybody have any questions, whether it's relating to Congress, the federal government, the president, anything? I'll just open up the floor. We can do about 5 or so minutes of questions. You?
Me?
Yeah.
For what?
Oh, I thought you had a question. My bad, man.
I'm just stretching my arm.
Oh, okay. All right. Any questions anywhere? All right, well, I've got 2 more books to give away, so I'm going to ask some trivia questions if you guys are down for that. Does anybody know who the first president to have an attempted assassination of was?
Was it Abraham Lincoln?
It was not. He was the first one to be successfully assassinated. The first one was actually Andrew Jackson. And his version of the Secret Service, he actually went on to beat the guy to death with his cane. He also fought, I think it was 32 members of Congress in duels. So Andrew Jackson was a fighter, not a guy you want to try to shoot. You have a question? Okay. All right, let's see. Does anybody here like ancient history? Okay, can anybody name me? Do we know who the 3 members of the triumvirate was in Rome? One of them was Caesar.
That's what I was gonna say.
Okay, Caesar was anybody. Who was the richest man in all of Rome? Does anybody know?
Wait.
Starts with a C, maybe Crassus and Pompey. Okay, let's think. What's another good question? Okay, what was the first war after the Revolutionary War? What was the first war the United States fought?
The War of 1812.
There we go. All right, let's get him another book. We're just. Will you pass one out to him? What's your name, brother?
Silas.
Silo, good name. All right, so you're getting a book called Extreme Ownership. It was written by a guy named Jocko Willink. It's a great book about just taking ownership of all the variables around you and really taking ownership of your life. It's a good one. All right, so before I ask the next question, does anybody have any questions about anything revolving around the federal government whatsoever? Ma'am.
Okay, could you tell us what President Trump is like?
Absolutely, yes. So Donald Trump, when I ran my election in 2020, he had never been beaten in a primary election. So if he came in and endorsed somebody, they almost always win their primary election. But he actually endorsed against me in my race for a woman, because again, no 24-year-old ever been elected, so I don't blame him for thinking that I wasn't going to be able to win that election. But he endorsed a very kind woman. I've got nothing wrong with her, but we were able to beat her. So on the way home from our victory party, I get a phone call, and it doesn't say unknown number, it just said restricted across the phone. And my phone's connected to Bluetooth and playing music, so I answer it, and then his voice comes on the phone. And this guy says, "Hello, Mr. Cawthorn, my name's John. I'm on the Air Force One switchboard. I'd like to connect you to the President of the United States. That's okay with you?" I said, "Well, of course." And there's a little pause. And then you hear Donald Trump, and he goes, "Madison, you even beat my butt. I can't believe it. I can't believe that you won. It's incredible." And so anyway, so we're sitting there talking. I tell him, "Well, Mr. President, I know that you could have attacked me harder, so I appreciate you not attacking me so hard. But then, for whatever reason, I got really bold. I said, 'Well, Mr. President, I'll let you make it up to me if you would.' And then he said, 'Well, how about you bring your entire family to Washington, D.C., and just whenever you want to come.' And so my parents, my brother, all of my family, then a bunch of my little nieces, we went to the White House. He hosted us there. It was awesome. We got to go into the White House movie theater room, see some amazing stuff. It was really cool. And then, he asked my family to leave. He just had some one-on-one time with me, and we got to speak. And, to get to see how he treats all of his staff, from people that are just in the kitchens, people that can't help him at all, to the most important people. He treats the normal Americans even better than he does the important people you see in the news. Because normally they're trying to backstab or attack him, and he doesn't put up with that at all. So to see how funny he is and how kind he is was really incredible. But then after I left that, I was staying at the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. Someone came and knocked on my door really late at night, and then they took me out, and it was probably 2 a.m., and then so I go out and I meet with some of the members of his press office, and they say, hey, if you had the opportunity, and again, it's 2 a.m, to be able to speak to the entire country for 3 minutes, what would you say? And then they started a timer. And so I was like, oh, I'm doing a tryout right now to speak at the Republican National Convention. And so then I gave probably the best speech of my life I've ever given to 3 people at 2 a.m. on some very cold balcony. But then after that, I was allowed to speak at the RNC, and that speech was watched by 61 million people. And it was able to really turn the tide of an election and be able to get a majority for us in Congress, which was amazing. And so that just goes to show, a lot of people say, oh, well, you were lucky you got to speak at the RNC, but don't ever assume things are luck. A lot of things are God. But whenever I hear the word luck, I just hear opportunity met with preparation. And so if I wasn't prepared to give that speech at 2 a.m. to 3 people to be able to try out, I would not have given an opportunity to get to speak to 61 million people and change the influence of the entire nation. And so whenever you think you're just waking up and going to have a boring day, or it doesn't matter how I dress today, or what doesn't matter, you never know what opportunities God has for you in store. So be very, very committed to being excellent in everything that you do, because you never know who's watching and you never know who you're talking to. So guys, I've got time for about 2 more questions. Anybody have any? You.
What's it like inside the White House?
Oh, so that's a good question. Okay, so actually, I'll tell you. So on the side of my wheelchair here, I have a knife that I keep right here, which, I grew up in the South. I'm sure a lot of you guys like pocket knives, but that's where I keep mine because I can't really get to my pockets. But once I got into the White House, I was sitting there, and you go through all the Secret Service stuff, and they're really nice and everything, but the Secret Service does not have a sense of humor. They're checking everybody. They've got to keep the president very safe. But anyway, so as I'm with the president, he said, oh, well, come over here. And he had this little closet off of the Oval Office, which is a beautiful room. There's cameras everywhere. And I go over there, and he's giving out gifts. And so I'm talking to the president. I lean over, and I feel I have my knife in my chair. There's a Secret Service guy right behind me, and then it's me and the president alone. I'm right beside him, like, this guy's going to see my hand on my knife. I'm about to get shot. What is going to happen? And so, anyways, thankfully, that didn't happen. I was like, guys, I just realized they didn't care. Everything was fine. But I will tell you, the White House is incredible, and especially the Resolute desk, which is the desk that every single president in U.S. history has used. That is so cool to get to touch, because you can go through and see, so many presidents, whether it's Reagan or any of the presidents, whenever they go on this live broadcast, they say, they always say, my fellow Americans, when they're saying that we've got, whether we killed Saddam Hussein or we've ended the war in Vietnam, to get to be at that desk where all of those decisions were made, that was something that was really, really cool. And to see all the history behind it. But I'll tell you, the coolest part is about 60 feet underground is the presidential bunker, which I got to go into one time. And they have a situation room upstairs, but the coolest situation room is downstairs. And every single wall is just and I know Zora knows what I'm talking about. He's been in a lot of these rooms. But every single wall is just covered in all of these amazing, televisions and all of these things. And, they have live satellite imagery of what's going on. You can watch the missions from helmet cams on all of the soldiers' stuff and any of the secret missions that are going on. And so it's really amazing. I got to watch from that room one time as they were doing a test for intercepting as if someone launched a missile at the United States. And literally, the satellites are so fast, they could watch the missile in real time as it made contact with another missile. And so it was pretty incredible. And we're very safe inside of the White House, I will tell you that. You could shoot a missile at the place and nothing would even happen. It's incredible. All right, I got time for one more question. Yes?
How do you get around with the wheelchair?
That is a great question. So fortunately, God gave me big arms, so I was able to, I always ask, why are my arms so long? Because they're longer than I am tall, which was odd. But I think God knew I was going to be in a wheelchair. So it's really helpful if I'm playing pickleball with Alicia. It helps a lot. But really, I just kind of push like this, but it makes my triceps really strong. But then, I've got my brother back here, River. He can raise his hand. He's very strong. He's got me, we've been to 3 of the wonders of the world, one in Jordan and Petra. And he took me all through the canyons and across crazy cliffs. He fell off a horse there, which was always exciting. That was fun to watch. But, so that's how I get around in the wheelchair. But anyways, do we need to get, oh, yes, ma'am.
You remind me of Charlie Kirk. Did you know him?
Yes. So Charlie Kirk was a really, really good friend of mine. He's 4 years older than me, but I'll tell you, he really seemed like he was 10 years, 20 years older than me because he was just so wise in the things that he did. When we found out that he died, that was one of the saddest things. I called his wife right away. But it's just, Charlie was a really good friend to me. And, it just goes to show there's a lot of infighting in politics right now, especially amongst the Republican Party. And it just goes to show how important Charlie was because he really held the coalition together. He was, an ardent defender of our faith, of our Christian values, of our American values. But he was still willing to say, oh, me and this person agree on 80%. Their value will be here. And he's really a great gatekeeper to keep things peaceful and keep things moving forward in the right direction. And I remember one time I asked him, I was like, oh, hey, Charlie, if you want to come skiing with me, we have this great fundraiser in Colorado. It's going to be this awesome thing. And I don't know, I was probably 26 at the time. He was about, probably just turned 30. And I remember he told me, he said, Madison, no, I can't go to that. I'm too valuable to the movement. I can't risk myself doing something even though it would be fun. And in my head, I was like, man, that is the lamest thing I've ever heard in my life. You can't go skiing. But now we saw how important Charlie was to our movement and to the country as a whole, and to young people getting involved and knowing what's going on in the country. And so he absolutely was that important, and we miss him a lot. But he was an amazing man. He had so much to say. He was fearless when he went in to speak. And America needed a hero, and God sent Charlie Kirk. And so we all miss him a lot. But he was amazing. Zora, did you have a question? Oh, yes, ma'am.
What was Donald Trump like?
Oh, first, he is super, super nice. One, he is really funny. He will make jokes that you will not expect at all. He's cracked some funny wheelchair jokes. My brother does all the time, but, I remember one time we were all standing up for the national anthem, and he says, Madison, stand up, just being funny, because obviously I can't stand, which was just, he's such a kind guy. And then he made everything so accessible for me if I was ever at any of his properties. If there were stairs, he would send out the Secret Service to literally carry me up the steps. And so he is an outrageously kind man, very, very aggressive when it comes to getting stuff done. And, he wrote a great book called The Art of the Deal, but, he will shoot 2 miles ahead of his target when he goes out and talks about things. But everyone will freak out and say, that's crazy. But then, in reality, what he wanted to get in the beginning, people then, oh, well, that makes total sense. And so he'll move something called the Overton window, which is what people think is, the most acceptable thing that someone can say that's outrageous. He'll move that so far that then when he says, well, actually, I just want to have, 100,000 troops in Greenland, I want to have all of these things, I don't want to go just conquer it, it then seems extremely reasonable. And so he's really, really wise, and he's a great chess player, which actually, he is actually a very good chess player in real life, which is fun. All right, you, sir.
Wait, if you said that you could get around, how can you get up the stairs?
Well, so one, I've got my brother right here. He's good at carrying me up them. And then, Donald Trump sent the Secret Service to literally carry me up one time, which was really cool. So that was really nice of him. But you know what? That's the reason all young men need to be very strong. You never know when you're going to need help with a guy in a wheelchair. Do we have time? Do we need to get to class? We got more time to talk.
Could you speak to which political issues are you most vocal about?
Absolutely. So when we start talking about political issues that matter the most, one that I speak out a lot, and it's a touchy subject, but we should not be afraid to talk about touchy subjects, because the biggest problem in America right now is people are afraid to talk about situations or issues where they think, that might offend somebody. And so many people say, well, we shouldn't talk about religion or politics. And because we don't talk about religion or politics, we now have a country that is very bad at discussing religion and politics, which when it comes to it, where people are going to spend eternity when it comes to religion and relationship with Jesus Christ is the most important thing in the world. And then what our country looks like, if we're safe, if we have money to spend, if we're able to have families, if we're able to buy homes, when it comes down to politics, that is the most important thing. And so I know sometimes it might be offensive, or some people might not think it's a fun conversation to have, but we need to be focused on talking about politics. And so, a lot of people think that abortion is a touchy subject. But unfortunately, we need to discuss that. Whenever there is evil being confronted in this world or things going on, we have to be willing to speak out about it, even if it's going to offend anybody. Because I'm sorry, the unborn babies cannot speak for themselves, so we have to stand up and be their champion. So that's one that I'm really big on. A second one that I think is really important, the reason I bring it up second, is because it is the Second Amendment. And does anybody have any water? I just need a sip of water if anybody has one. But when we talk about the Second Amendment, your ability to be able to own firearms, a lot of people think that, well, that causes firearm deaths and there might be an accident, someone might accidentally shoot somebody. And anybody that dies in America, it's always a tragedy. It's very sad. But the Second Amendment exists to prevent a disaster from happening. When we founded our country, we had to fight against the greatest empire the world had ever known. And if we did not have thank you so much, brother. If we did not have the kind of weapons that their armies had, we would not be able to be a free country today. And so one that I think that we have to protect really hard is the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, to be able to fight against tyranny or people coming to attack you or anything like that. Because even if you're just talking about self-defense, somebody breaking into your house, you don't have time for the police to get here. We love our law enforcement. They do a great job, especially here in Florida and Southwest Florida especially. But you need to be able to defend your family. And one of the great things, whether if you are a girl and you're out strength, Zoran is great at hand-to-hand. He could probably beat my mom in a fight, no doubt about that.
Maybe.
But let me tell you, my mom's really mighty, I'll tell you that. The homeschool moms, you don't want to mess with them. Don't get between there and the babies. But the one thing that makes, having firearms such a great necessity is that it's the great equalizer. You don't have to be afraid of roaming hordes coming to fight you because you have the ability to defend yourself. So that's one that I'm really, really emphatic on. But the last one that I care a lot about, and it goes into something that a lot of people, they wonder if we should be involved in or not. When it comes down to social media and people trying to control what you say, if we don't have the ability to get our message out, if people want to say, oh, I'm sorry, that's being censored, you're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to speak about this, then it's just going to leave our country deaf and dumb, and people will not know about government corruption that's going on. There was just a young man, Nick Shirley, he's only 22 years old. He went out and he made a great video. You all may have seen it when he said, oh, look, this is a place called the Leering Center. He made a great video that actually had a governor just drop out of a governor's race, a man who was about to become the vice president in 2024, which is incredible. But it just goes to show the power that you all individually have. So never feel like you can't make a difference because, maybe there's not as many homeschoolers as there are public schools. Maybe we can't make a difference. When you think about that, remember that when the Patriots fought against the British and their German mercenaries, only 3% of the United States population actually decided to get up and fight against the greatest empire the world had ever known. And we won that war. 1, because men and women were strong enough and bold enough to stand up. 2, because God was with us. But the main thing is that because we were fewer than the other, or we were the minority, or didn't have as much power, we did not give in. And that is something that you all need to remember. No matter how dark it is, no matter how evil the world is, you as homeschoolers and as young Americans are being raised as dragon slayers. And what a time to do it when there are actual dragons to slay, actual evil in this world. So take your studies very seriously. Take becoming physically, mentally, and spiritually strong very seriously. Because my friends, the world is going to get a lot darker before it gets better. And it is our time. We were sent here for such a time as this. God sent each and every single one of you here to be able to save this country and save the world so that we can be Christians, we can be homeschooled, we can believe what we want to do, and the future generations can live in freedom. That is what God entrusted you with, and that is why you are here. So be bold as lions, my friends. Really. But if you all ever need anything, or if this group ever wants to do a class trip to DC or anything, I will happily organize it. We'll have the coolest tour of the Capitol you've ever had. But you're going to have to stay up late because we can do a Capitol tour like everybody else does. But the cool part about being a member of Congress is you get access to the Capitol for the rest of your life. So we will go in late at night when nobody else is there, and I'll show you guys how we vote. Actually, hang on. This is kind of a cool thing.
Let's plan that. And if you want to teach the debate and logic and history,
Yes,
then we will sign you up here at Kurios Academy.
If you guys want to do like a 1 or 2 month debate class, we will have so much fun. But anyways,
Let's do that too.
I wanted to show one more thing. So this is your member ID. It got the U.S. seal on the back. But this is probably the most important card you could ever have. And why I tell you that you individually matter. So with this card, every single day, I did it probably I think 3,400 something times. I got to vote on behalf of 790,000 Americans. I would put this into a little machine, and then I would hit yes or no, deciding laws for all 400 million people inside of the United States. So remember, if you are serious about your life, if you take the opportunities that God gives you and do all that you can, your voice can be amplified to where you speak for 1 million people 3,000 times every single year with just the push of a button. Never forget how powerful you can be. Wow.
Thank you so much.